Okay. We will call the meeting to order, the July 15th, 2020 Swartz Creek School Board meeting. And I would invite everybody to join us for the pledge. Travis has a flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, and thanks, Travis. I forgot my flag today, so he was kind enough to find one for us. All right, so with that, we have, welcome everybody and everybody who's watching. We have a consent agenda before us, and I would entertain a motion to approve.
One suggestion, Madam President, we do have a minor ad after our committee meetings today. Joanne has put it in the Google folder, but for everybody, for the purpose of everybody, there is an ad. It's an 8B. It would be for the scoreboard approval, the scoreboard and sound approval.
Okay. So
Joanne.
With that change, I didn't catch who made the motion. Is that Brian? I'm not sure who made the motion.
Mike did.
Okay, Mike, thank you. Who was the second? Anybody?
Second.
Did we get a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, any comments or questions? Okay, with the adjustment to the agenda, adding 8B for the scoreboard. Joanne, can you do roll call, please?
Joanne, you're muted.
Sorry, Brian,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
and who did I miss? Brian,
Jessica?
Jessica, I'm sorry.
That's all right. Yes.
Okay, that
Okay.
is 7 yeses.
Motion passes. Thank you. So going on to Superintendent Report. Ben?
Thank you so much. Yeah, we have a tremendous amount of work that's being done, as many of you know, and I know I've communicated with not only the board, but with the staff and the families in the district. The governor and her team have released the Return to School Roadmap, and it's a very comprehensive document. It's going to involve quite a few recommendations that we've just quite frankly been working a lot to figure out how we're going to make all of those recommendations work. I will be sharing some detail of that in my board discussion time today with you on that topic. I would also let you know that we've been working pretty diligently on a 3-phase plan for moving classrooms, as a result of moving to elementary reconfiguration. Those are going well and on schedule, and we're on quite a time crunch. Obviously, the building's under construction. We have site work packages that are going to be considered tonight, and so we have to get a lot of these moves completed so that those things can find their natural home in time for us to be able to do some of those other pieces. Also, quite a bit of work being done right now. We have multiple committees and teams of teachers working on our instructional delivery systems relative to our hybrid, our online, and our face-to-face offerings. And so we're doing a lot of kind of concurrent work. So we have some operational pieces in place. We also have quite a few pieces in place relative to what our instruction would look like in the fall. And so it's definitely quite a bit, and something that we're up for the challenge, and we're going to create the best educational opportunities for our children as possible. So I'm very proud of the work being done. I have to say, publicly, Travis Smith, has been tremendous. There's a lot of work that he is doing. I know a lot of you are seeing him work on these board meetings, but that's, 1/1,000,000th of what he's doing all day long. And so there are a lot of people like Travis that are working really hard, working long hours to try and make sense of the technology requirements, a lot of the things that just have to be done as we're in this kind of remote state. I will say the governor spoke today as well at 3:00. There was nothing overly pertaining to schools, but recently she signed another executive order requiring face masks. She had previously signed that executive order. This was a little bit more stringent. And so obviously, as we gather in even small groups here in the buildings, that continues to be a requirement. And so we are following the guidance from the executive order as well. So just lots going on, but thankful for all of your willingness to work throughout things. I know we'll talk about some of that tonight in some of our discussion. Thank you.
Ben, I have one question if I can go through, Madam President.
Sure.
Sure.
With the executive orders and the masks and all that, how come we're not meeting in person yet? Why can't we meet in person and wear our masks and socially distance?
We are allowed to have a limit of indoors of 10 people. So technically, the board could so choose to comply with that particular order. The legal guidance and the attorneys have written official opinions to us saying that we cannot meet in person. We cannot meet any type of, Open Meetings Act guidelines for public participation. I'm not an attorney, so I can't really argue that. But what I could tell you is that I think we can meet together within groups of 10 or less. The guidance that had been given to us, we assumed that we would be moving into phase 5, which would have put us at a 25% capacity, which opens up the possibility to meet in an area like the PAC at 25% capacity. That only applies right now to regions 6 and 8, which is up in the UP and up in northern Michigan. And as cases have been on the rise, she has actually not opened us up to that phase. So we are still under directive, under order, that we cannot hold a public gathering of more than 10 people in one location. So that's the guidance that I'm following.
Well, I was just concerned because I know we had a rally on school property and there's a lot more than 10 people there. And I don't know how we can let some things pass and then we can't meet. I don't get it.
Well, I can speak to that briefly. There's a couple things. First of all, the school district doesn't have any events or gatherings of any kind that are sponsored by the school. The outdoor allocation is 100 people. So when you're dealing with a gathering outside, you're allowed to have up to 100 people in a separate area, separate event. Again, nothing sponsored by the school has even approached that amount. That would be something that, in terms of the rally, that was not our event. But I will say, we are still under the same guidelines. And so we could technically hold an event if it was outside of up to 100 people. Indoors, we are still under the requirement for 10.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep.
Ben, are you going to talk about graduation at some point?
Yeah, I can speak to that briefly right now. I'll be communicating some more details to you tomorrow. As Mr. Melke just asked, we had been under the hope that the restrictions would be moving in the other direction. There was indication that even before July 4th, we might be moving to phase 5. There has been subsequent communication indicating that we will not be moving in that direction at this time. And so that has a huge impact on our graduation for this weekend. Our high school team is working diligently about how to comply with the executive orders. but it looks as though there are going to have to be several separate events that are held outside. And the amount of people inside at any one time cannot exceed 10 people. And so unfortunately, our plans that we had originally had will not be able to commence unless the governor somehow in the next couple days changes course and moves this region. We are in Region 1. Region 1 in Genesee County is also attached to Wayne County, which obviously where the predominance of the cases are. So at this time, our graduation ceremony for Sunday, we are still holding it. We are going to have to make modifications to it because the restrictions have not yet been lifted to a point to allow us that 25%.
But the 25% for the PAC is based on the total capacity per the fire marshal of 1,100, correct?
That's correct. And so through our planning, the assumption is that we would be in phase 5 and then subsequently be under that 25% rule, which would allow us to move our plan forward. The state has not moved us to that stage yet. So just like Mr. Melke asked, I would just have to say that our graduation falls under the same circumstances. So in order for us to complete a ceremony, there has to be gatherings at events of no more than 100 people. And so you have to have different sites, different areas, and anyone inside can only be at 10 people. So we do have a plan B in case this happened. We'll be communicating out. The high school's communicating with the staff right now. Board participation will be impacted. So I'll be reaching out to you individually tomorrow just to kind of see how you want to be involved or not. Unfortunately, this isn't what anyone wanted. I think everybody would prefer to be in person. But unfortunately, with the restrictions that we're under, and we are highly, highly held accountable to those restrictions, we are not allowed to meet with more than 10 people inside or 100 people at any particular individual gathering or event. So we're working on the details to be able to still execute something for our kids on Sunday. And those details are being communicated to those families and kids even this evening, I believe.
Thanks, Ben. Any questions for Ben? Okay. All right. We have Brendan. There he is. Looking for the square or the rectangle. We have Brendan here tonight to give us an update on the student board report.
Hello, thank you. So overall, the students seem to be making the best out of their summer so far. A lot of students have gone on vacation, spent more time with friends and family outdoors, and some are even planning mini proms with their immediate friend groups. Overall, one of the biggest concerns among the student body is that of how school will look in the fall naturally. And the biggest question I've gotten regarding how school will be operating back in the fall is extracurriculars and how extracurricular activities like sports, performing arts, stuff like that, how those are going to be affected. But other than that, the students seem resilient despite all the dreariness that is the coronavirus pandemic.
Any questions for Brendan?
Yes, I do.
Thanks, Brian.
Yes. Brendan, could you, just in a nutshell, can you introduce yourself to us? I don't think, I've never met you before, and I don't know who in the board has, but I would just like a little introduction piece, that's all.
My name is Brendan Johnson. I'm an upcoming senior at Swartz High School, and I am a big patron of the arts. I'm involved in all sorts of arts. I love everything art related, and I am a big advocate for people. I love social activism, and overall, I wanted this position just to help lift up the student body and to lift their voice and to help get their perspective heard where the decisions are made. So,
well, I appreciate that, and welcome to the Swartz board.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Brendan, did you share with us previously what your future plans might be?
Not with the whole group, no. Like my future plans as in like college?
Whatever it is you plan to do in the future.
I plan on attending college for either political science, music theater, or both, preferably both. And then I would pursue both of those careers separately outside of that.
Good for you. Thank you for
Thank you.
sharing.
Thank
Nice
you.
to get to know you a little bit more, and we look forward to having you serve with us on the board.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, now we have several subcommittee reports, and I think, Brian, you're up first. Did you get
Well,
yours
I'm
on
gonna-
the screen?
I'm gonna try sharing. I don't know how. Are you still there?
We're
We're
here.
here. If you can see it on your screen, Brian, we have it in our file too, if you just want to go over it.
And
Well, we
it's
had a
actually
meeting.
in the shared drive if you need to share it.
What if you have somebody else go first, and then I'll while I'm looking for this. Gary?
Sure, I can go. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I can go over the Academic Achievement Committee. We met on Monday morning at 8 o'clock. Actually, we started at 8:32 after a very robust policy meeting. And Rod gave us an overview of the return to school roadmap that's been presented by the governor and the committee. And it goes from phase 1 to 3, where basically children are at home, and then goes up through 4, 5, and 6. 6 being the least concern in terms of safety protocols. And he explained the differences between each of those, went briefly through the overall document, which is rather lengthy, but very good read. And in phase 1 to 3, I know there's been a lot of conversation about the concern with behavioral health and mental health for everybody through this phase in the COVID pandemic. And through phase 1 to 3, that would include mental health checks and crisis management team updates and availability of counselors and social workers, some programs for special ed students, and a bank of wellness resources that would be maintained by the district. Ben talked about the transition from Google Classroom to Canvas, and that's the platform that will support the virtual, hybrid, and face-to-face learning modalities. And there's a training under development that will help educate parents on how to use Canvas. Ben and Rod also met with the E2020 task force on Monday to review the plans that Ben mentioned earlier in the meeting. Let's see, Ben talked a little bit earlier also about the phased-in approach for physical reconfiguration of the elementary schools, and talked about some of the advantages of the collaboration between same grade teachers being able to collaborate in common planning time, and they've not been able to do that before. Also, including a 90-minute literacy block for students so that there's a greater rate of success of being able to read successfully by the end of 3rd grade. And as I mentioned, Rod included a link to the Safe Schools Roadmap document that was published by the governor's committee. And no public comment. Any questions? No? Miss anything, Rod or Ben? Nope. I'm sure you're going to talk about it anyway later. All right. Are you ready, Brian?
Yeah,
or
yes, I am.
Okay, sure. Go ahead.
Okay, we met Monday at 7 o'clock. It was a Zoom meeting. We were called to order at 7 o'clock. The first item was the employee COVID-19 procedures and protocols. That's going to be, all of these things are continuing discussions. There's going to be, I'm sure there's going to be a hiccup occasionally here along the way when school starts, but we're being, we're working under the authority of the Genesee County Health Department and all the executive orders and guidance and through the governor's office. And that return to roadmap that was developed, that's going to help guide us in a lot of the policies procedures and protocol. The first item, though, was the questionnaire. All employees, staff, people working will have to, there's a digital questionnaire that'll be saved indefinitely. It's a check-in form. It's going to be reviewed and screened by supervisors and administration to help determine personnel risk and fitness to work. Things like over a certain temperature, there's going to be that person is going to need to report to the supervisor if it's over a certain temperature, and there's going to be a protocol on that, how that goes on. The sick day, and I think what has it been? 24 hours once they've come down off that temperature.
Correct.
Temperature, 24 hours at least. And again, the authority that we're looking for when it comes to things like that will be the Genesee County Health Department. B was the mask. Unless this changed from Monday, the new executive orders that came out, all employees must wear masks, and then students K through 6 not required. All others are required. And again, this is the governor's 60-page return to roadmap outlining all 1 through 6 phases. We will be following that. There's, again, a lot of discussion. There's going to be changes. Who knows how often? I mean, we could change before graduation. We might have some other guidance that may change the policy or protocol in how we're conducting our business. Positive test cases, number D. Policy and protocol developed, reported to, we're responding again to the authority of the Genesee County Health Department. It's going to be a continuing process and a continuing discussion. 3, the student COVID policy considerations for fall of 2020. Of course, we've got the 6-foot social distancing, the masks are required, the temperature sensing, and the continuing discussions on attendance policy, mask enforcement, community mask enforcement, and the positive test case procedures. Number 4, masks versus face shields. This was rather interesting. I didn't even think about face shields, but it's got that clear window where you can see a person's face. So as far as an instructor teaching, especially younger kids, they'll be able to see and sense what the teacher's saying by her facial expressions also, if she's wearing one of the or if they are wearing one of the face shields. I'm not sure if it's any safer than the mask. It's up in the air right now, but it's a continuing discussion again. We've got the better facial clarity and communication. We also discussed various styles to consider. And number 5, board meetings and gatherings, face-to-face versus virtual Zoom. We just had a little bit of that discussion. Chuck brought up meeting face-to-face and the reasons why we can't at this time as far as board meetings. So we are in compliance with the governor's executive orders, and we're also in compliance with the health department. Again, it's going to be a continuing discussion, a continuing process, and I'm sure changes will happen quickly as things tighten or loosen. We had no public comment, and then we were adjourned. Any questions?
I have one, Brian.
Yes.
What was the temperature? What was the threshold of the temperature? Was that mentioned?
Yes, it was. In fact, I've got it written in my notes, but I don't have that. Ben, do you remember what that was?
It's 100.4.
Okay, yes.
100.4. Thank you, Ben. Thank
Yep.
you, Brian.
Any other questions?
That's surface temperature, right?
Correct.
Yes.
What's the delta between surface and internal?
I'm not really sure about that. That's a really good question. What we've been given from the Genesee County Health Department is basically saying people that have a temperature through a temporal scan thermometer that is 100.4 or higher cannot come to the workplace, into the buildings. So that was provided to us by the health department.
Ben, to clarify, the like, policy considerations as we're looking at it, or that questionnaire that Brian spoke to, is self-reporting, correct? We're not going to be doing them ourselves.
That is correct. And so the executive order requires that the school district provide a digital or some sort of a logging mechanism for employees to self-report. So employees must have their temperature taken, and then they're under the obligation to complete that form. But the district is not actually taking other people's temperature. This is done individually on their own.
The temporal thermometers, Ben, is the school going to provide those? Is that going to be a personal matter?
That will be up to the individual. The school does have them for some of our summer events. Prior to the executive order being released, we were under advisement to purchase a few so that we had them for some of our summer activities until we got further clarity. What we've learned since, as the roadmap's been released, is that we are not under obligation to take those temperatures once the fall hits. And so we will discontinue that use. So we will maintain them for parent use in our offices. In some of our new offices, we'll have some sick rooms and what we would call our clinics. And parents can authorize, a secretary or an aide if they would like to have their child's temperature taken for those purposes, particularly for younger children.
Another question that came to mind was, so if a person puts in the survey, the digital survey, that they are 100.4 or higher, the process, who's going to, do they report to the supervisor immediately that with a call in that they're above that risk temperature?
That's correct. Yep, it goes directly to their direct supervisor, and then their direct supervisor will take that advisement and follow a protocol that's been provided by the health department. So what it essentially will mean, though, is at least for that day, they will not be reporting to work.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thanks, Brian.
Thank you.
Yeah, I got one. How are we going to do this for students then when they come into classroom? And we're still quarantined, and then we only got about 6 more weeks before school starts. What are we doing, Ben?
Yeah, it's your concern on that was exactly what mine was. I'll talk a little bit about it when we get into the return to school roadmap, but
Okay.
we are very concerned because I don't have the staff, the personnel, or the expertise to be able to have almost 4,000 people's temperature taken every day when they enter facilities. So that's actually something that's going to be an obligation on the parents. That the district is not actually, they're recommending that we don't do that for students because there are HIPAA considerations and other things that we have to consider once we start to log and take student temperatures without parent consent. So it's a really hot topic issue that schools all over are dealing with. But I would say the good news is, in terms of how the schools will do this, as you have the same concern I do, is that we are not under obligation to take the temperatures of students come the fall.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks. Mike,
Yes,
Finance?
the Finance Committee met on Monday at 9:21 a.m. Check register for June has been reviewed. Following noted: General Fund, 106 checks for $405,379.87. Payroll, 20 checks, $2,171,464.54. Building and Site, 1 check, $623.93. Food service, 5 checks, $129,825.52. Student account fund, 15 checks, $28,139.87. Debt, 1 check, $1,345.74. Bond, 7 checks, 1,942,572.26. Lewis and Knopf CPA, Mr. Jeff Sabalish gave a pre-audit presentation and explained in brief their procedures. Mainly, they will be reviewing the district's revenue, payroll, and federal grant compliance. On-site work will be conducted on August 2nd and 3rd. Due to June being the end of the district's fiscal year, there was not a cash flow report at this time. 4 elementary site work bids have been received and will be discussed and voted on this evening. Middle school bids, which came in over budget, will also be discussed. We had extensive discussion regarding the prioritizing of a list of 16 possible budget cuts. These will also be discussed in detail this evening. There were no public comment. Next meeting is August 17th, and we adjourned at 10:56 a.m. Any questions? Thank you.
Thanks, Mike. All right, Chuck, Building and Site.
Yes. The meeting was started at 4:02 p.m. July 13th, 2020. We did it over Zoom. Present at the meeting was myself, Jessica, Tony, Brian, Rod, RC, Travis, Mike, and Ben. I believe that was it. The first agenda item was the custodial service update. The board discussed bringing Michelle Robinson, the new custodial supervisor, in to meet the entire board soon. We have currently approximately 13 employees working, and we'll be hiring more personnel, up to 23 employees total at the beginning of the school year. That'll give us, our RC wanted between 23 and 25, I believe, employees total to cover all the schools and our facilities. This is on track and running smoothly. It should have been noted, though, just as a slight note, DM Burr had some legal concerns with some of our custodial staff that may have come to work for the Swartz Creek schools that were going through the Edge of Staff program, but Edge of Staff has indicated that they will deal with DM Burr directly on these issues. Any questions on that item? Next item was the pool consideration update. RC has contacted other pool companies to get a better cost estimate and some of the concerns and some other options for the pool leak, and has discovered that most pool companies in or around the area could not handle it or would not do the job if they did not originally install the pool. There was some question on who even installed the pool 50 years ago. So a larger company that specialized in this from Grand Rapids was contacted by the name of Advance. They gave an estimate of approximately $80,000 to $90,000, which is considerably more than our original estimate. And this should be taken for full board consideration because it was so much money. And we will bring it back to the next building and grounds meeting to see if RC can find out any more on that and what the board wishes are. And Jessica brought up the possibility of maybe asking some of our partner schools if they could help defray the cost with us, if we decided to go through with it. Anything on that agenda item? Third agenda item was the PPE sanitation equipment. Discussions on masks, thermometers, which we just talked about, et cetera, other equipment, and how we could defray the cost. And hopefully most of the costs would be deferred to federal grant money, would be available for this type of PPE equipment. RC did note, though, that he wanted some more Mister backpacks that could easily disinfect the school buses. He said he already purchased several for the classrooms, and this would save time for the bus drivers, and that the chemicals that they were using have been approved and that they've had no issues with them so far. And he wanted to purchase, I believe, I don't have it here, I think 7 or 9 more to clean the buses so the bus workers didn't have to wipe them down by hand. And I believe the cost was close to $300 per unit. Any questions on that one?
Chuck, sorry, I don't know if you can hear me well. My only question would be, do we have information that those are obviously more, well, I'm assuming more effective than an individual hand wiping.
I think from what RC said, and anybody can correct me that was wrong, or if I'm wrong, that was there. He said that it worked just as well, if not the same,
Okay.
and that it would be much quicker because I guess it's time consuming for the employees, the bus drivers, to wipe down all the seats. And I didn't know, but he said that they're already using it in some of the classrooms. Ben may be able to elaborate a little bit more on this, but that was my understanding.
Yeah, Chuck's 100% correct on that. We have these machines have an extremely fine mist that they spray. The technology, there are some videos that you can access online. If you look up a Clorox 360 machine, it will show you what exactly it does. But it's another item that we're looking into now, because how do you completely keep the disinfecting going on? You would need to hire a tremendous amount of people to be able to wipe down every physical spot on a bus seat. And so they've done some studies on these videos where they show germs, through camera, different types of infrared angles and things like that. And then what happens when these machines mist on them? They do have to dry, but it allows for the personnel that's using them to disinfect effectively a bus in under 2 minutes. Which is something that will make it possible for us to keep everything clean and disinfected. Most school districts across the country are looking at this technology that's just recently been developed as a result of having to, sanitize in between runs, sanitize classrooms, more than just wiping down the hard surfaces. They have to be disinfected now. So that's all a part of our updated cleaning protocols. So.
Thank you. I'm actually 100% in favor of that. I think anything that we can take away from the individual to be responsible to fully disinfect for the safety of our students, I think is a great idea.
Yeah.
Ben, you said that the chemical dries quickly, because as I understand it, don't they have to do a cleaning before and after runs? Or is it at the end of the day and then the beginning of end of each run?
No, we'll be disinfecting between runs. So not when students are on the bus, but when the students enter the bus, it will be disinfected and cleaned each time. So they have to be able to do this quickly. They don't have time to be able to, so the only way that we can feasibly disinfect things is through this type of technology.
But it'll be dry when the students get on.
Correct.
I'm just anticipating that will maybe be a question some folks might have.
Yeah, I think that a lot of it's going to be trial and error. I can't speak 100% to, well, there was an area that was more in the shade and it was slightly damp. I don't have any guarantees of that. I'm just kind of going off of what we're being advised, that it dries very quickly. So I guess a lot of that's going to depend on just how soon someone is making contact with something. But the chemical that's used in these devices kills on contact. So even if it was slightly damp, it's not, the virus is destroyed with the contact of this chemical.
Thanks.
Yeah.
Any more questions on that item? None? I guess I have one question myself. Do you think we should buy more, Ben, if there's going to be a rush to get all these? They weren't really horribly expensive, or do you think that's enough what RC want? It's 9 and 9 or something?
Yeah, I appreciate that thought. We definitely do want to order more, and that's part of what we just have done. We're using, the advisement of the county and other districts and across the state that are doing this, and so we ended up getting enough so that every bus can have them. But we also have enough for our custodians to be able to do this in classrooms when it's necessary as well. So I do believe that we will be looking into purchasing some additional units, which is a great thought. And so we are trying to get ahead of it. Obviously, hand sanitizer, masks, all of those things are going to be in short supply as every school district across the country and certainly in our state, especially now, are purchasing them. So thankfully, we were on top of it. We got our orders in time, and we should have no problem getting our PPE here. But yes, it's a great thought. We would probably like to even look at getting a few more just so that we have them throughout the building.
Okay. If there's no more further questions on that, next agenda item was the drinking fountain issues for all of our facilities. The traditional drinking fountains will not be able to be utilized anymore due to the COVID-19. RC came up with some options. One was blocking off the drinking stations and provide bottled drinking water. That was a very high cost. I think most of us on the subcommittee was against it. Then there was a bubbler system, which would cost approximately 65 to 70 bucks per unit. We have approximately 50 drinking stations. This is more of a layover program, we don't know if this would be a permanent solution. And then the other option was to replace all of the drinking fountains, not replace them so much, but put a bottle filling station at all the water fountains so the kids didn't have to wait. The problem with this though is about $1,100 per station, so it would be about $50,000 to $55,000 for the whole school district. There was discussion now that we would be able to use grant money with this latter option, and Ben and RC are going to look into the availability of the grant money to use this to see if it's allowable. And I believe that everybody on the subcommittee, I won't speak for everybody there, but I know me and Tony were pretty much for it, and I can't speak to everybody else. But any questions on the drinking fountain issues? That's something we have to address soon.
My question is on the grant. Is that a grant we already have, or is this a grant that we have to apply for?
I think it's coming in through the federal grant, but Ben can correct me on wrong on the federal stimulus money that was allocated for it. We just didn't know if it was actually specified for drinking stations. Ben, I'll let you take it.
Sure. Yeah. So a lot of the money that's going to be coming in through the federal stimulus packages are tied to these types of purchases. And so we've been given some preliminary authorization that will be an allowable expenditure. Obviously, the PPE and things like that are as well. Additionally, there have been, for example, at Morrish Elementary School, we actually had a student-led project that led to a grant just a few years ago that allowed them to replace the drinking fountains with fill stations. And so we believe that there are some other additional monies out there for these types of projects. And so we are looking into that right now. It's obviously an extensive undertaking. I, like Mr. Melky, don't want to assume that or speak for everybody on the committee, but I would say that the consensus at least was we probably should just go ahead and move forward and replace the drinking fountains with fill stations so that we just get it done. That's something that from a safety perspective is going to be required of us at some point. And we certainly don't want to be in a situation where kids are not hydrated or not allowed to fill their water bottles. We know that when we had the boil water alerts in the city, it was a couple years ago, we had it happen twice. We were rushing in pallets and pallets of bottled water, which is not necessarily environmentally conscious, but it also is extremely costly. So, just looking at it from that perspective, we're going to explore other funding options.
So do we need a motion, Ben? I mean, it's up to the board, but are we going to need a motion here tonight, you think, and switch the agenda around to authorize that? Or I guess you and Madam President can talk about it, figure out what you're going to do before the end of the meeting.
Well, and certainly if you want to make that type of a motion, I mean, obviously I'll let Mrs. Germain make that determination, but if you want to make that motion, certainly we could do that like as an up to or not to exceed amount. I was going to try and get a closer number and a price tag so that you could actually formalize a resolution. But if you felt more comfortable, it would certainly make it so we could act quickly. If you wanted to make a resolution up to a certain amount, we believe that number is going to be around $50,000. It could be less. In fact, I believe we'll be able to get it to be less, but that's the price tag to replace the drinking fountains across the district. Now, as we go through, we're doing this right now in terms of auditing how many fountains we need to replace versus As an example, you might have a drinking fountain that was there when the building was built 70 years ago that hasn't been in operation for 25 years. It's sitting in a vestibule somewhere. We're probably just going to block that one off and not replace it with a fill station. But we want to make sure we have adequate fill stations across the building so that the kids can fill their water bottles. So if you wanted to do a resolution tonight, I would say if you wanted to make a motion that it would be a not to exceed amount, we could do that. The other option would be to allow us an opportunity to actually get some pricing, and then we could talk about it in the August board meeting once we have that info. So that's up to the board.
Yeah, my only concern is, go ahead, Mike. I'm sorry. I only have one concern on that, but go ahead.
I don't see how we can wait till August 19th when schools start 2 weeks later.
That was my concern right there, Tony. That's my same concern. So if we think it's going to be grant money approved, I think, I mean, like I said, if you guys entertain a motion to change part of the agenda and make a resolution and we go up to a certain amount of money to get that rolling, I mean, it's going to be costly, $50,000 to $60,000 if we want a few $1,000s more, just to give you and RC some leeway. So, and I think the board, I mean, without speaking for everybody, I mean, and Tony brings up the point I was going to bring up, if we wait too long, we won't get it done, and who knows if there's going to be a rush on all that stuff once again for our kids.
I mean, regardless if we start school in August or we're delayed, we're going to need to do this.
Correct. I agree.
I don't see how we can wait.
I'll go on with the agenda, and then, I mean, I'll go on with the thing. Is that okay, Carrie, that we just keep going on, and then maybe we'll bring some stuff later?
Yeah, so Chuck, if there's no objection by the rest of the board, we can add that to, I think we would be at 8C for board action items. And then we can make a motion then.
Well,
Is that okay?
I just make a suggestion that we add that to the agenda tonight as 8C, and if there's support for it, then we can discuss it and vote on it.
Okay, all right, we'll do that.
Okay, so I'll go on. So we're done with the drinking fountains. Then we went to the School Dude programs. Everybody knows about School Dude. That program has been initiated. It's being installed. RC is going to give the board a full demonstration on how it works and will be utilized. The School Dude employees have not inputted all of our assets yet. We're working to have this completed soon. The total cost was what we originally said, about $58,000, not down from the $98,000. And so I don't think there was anything else on that. Any questions on that agenda item? And then the next agenda item was the summer cleaning of buildings. Some of the buildings are being cleaned. They're ahead and sterilized. And according to Ben, they're already ahead of track. A lot of it has to do with the schools being closed earlier. So the high school, middle school, and all the schools will be ready by school opening, if the district, of course, is allowed to open. And they're all sterilized and cleaned. Is that about right on that, Ben? Is that what you said on that?
That's exactly right. Yep.
Okay. Any discussion on that? And then the next agenda item was the elementary moving plan. Ben already discussed that earlier. The plan has already been initiated. It is a 3-stage plan phase without going into detail, but most of the items being moved were put at the cage as a staging area while other things were shuffled around. And then the items will be moved from the cage back to the other schools as permitted. Ben will give an update to the board on progresses and concerns on this program. And then the last agenda item, which was an add-on, was the auction discussion. Biddery Company will have a completed inventory done soon of all our items that are being stored at Mary Crapel and will be available to the public for bids. And the admin board will be able to inspect the progress beforehand, and then this will go out to the public locally and bids online, I guess. And then there was no public comment, and we concluded at 5:03 p.m.
Can I make one comment or clarify something?
Sure,
I
go
wanted
ahead,
to
Rick.
look back at my notes. Back when we were talking about the pool, that the local quote Johnson pools, I think was 28,000 is what I had in my notes. The other advance said 80 to 90 if we did the fix like Johnson, but they were talking about doing a drain on the side of the pool that would be an expense of closer to $35,000 to $40,000. And that way, right? Because they were talking about the high water table and suggesting that we run the piping along the side of the pool rather than the bottom of the pool. Do I remember
Yeah, I
that
think you're
correctly?
Yeah,
Just for
I think
clarification.
it wasn't 35,000. I think it was, that's why it was 90,000, because it was more, Jessica. I could be wrong.
no, actually, you're both correct. There was a ballpark number given to us around 80 to 90,000 to replace the entire bottom from Advance.
Oh, that's right. But the side drain.
Yep, and then the side drains they estimate would be less than half of that, but they don't have a quote until they have a drawing. RC has already met with the architects to draw that schematic up so that we can get a proper quote for the board. He's already executed that, so they're actually working on the drawings now. And then Advance would be able to give us a quote for those side drains, so we'll be able to bring something up at the next building and site meeting.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have. It was a long meeting, a good meeting, a lot was accomplished.
Thanks, Chuck. Any other questions for Chuck? Okay, moving on. We have 3 board discussion items, beginning with the back to school roadmap.
All right, I will go ahead and talk a little bit about the back to school roadmap, and what I'm going to do. I will actually share my screen here, which is going to have a document that is the actual roadmap itself. It's a very long document, so bear with me here for just a second. And I will try to share my screen with you, and you can see the roadmap itself. All right. So the Michigan Safe Schools Return to School Roadmap is a document that was put together by the Governor's Office, the COVID-19 Task Force on Education, and the Return to School Advisory Council. I've had the opportunity to speak with some of the council members. I've been on some conference calls with members from all of those committees, and the Governor's Office as well. I will obviously not go through all of this. This is about a 64-page document, and then there are subsequent orders that are over a couple hundred pages worth of guidance documents. I want to kind of go down and just kind of let you know that this is broken down into phases that are aligned to the phases that the state is in relative to returning back to work. So the governor, as you know, and we've already alluded to during my superintendent's report, the governor has assigned regions to everywhere in the state. So for example, we're in Region 1, and every region is in a different place relative to their case counts and things like that. And so every group will be assigned a phase at which they're in. So if you're in phases 0, 1, 2, or 3, those are kind of those more restrictive phases that we've been through, where we're under quarantine, we're in a stay-at-home order. As those restrictions have been softened or loosened, as we're in right now, we're in phase 4. We still are under restrictions, as we talked about the mask orders, the limiting of public gatherings, all of those types of things. And then as you get to phase 5, which is where we thought we might be heading, fewer restrictions and more loosening of the guidelines. And then at the time where you get to phase 6, that's the final phase, meaning that you're at the end of the virus, or the virus has become not a threat. So as we look at the roadmap, it's broken down into those same categories. And so I'm just showing you that when we talk about phases 1 through 3 from the Safe Start Plan, essentially what that means is that in phases 1 through 3, nobody is going to be going to face-to-face instruction. Right now, as I said earlier, we're in phase 4, but in phases 1 through 3, there will be no face-to-face instruction for students. And so as you get into this, there are requirements, and you'll see the word required, and you'll see the word recommended throughout the document. The requirements essentially here are pretty straightforward. Students are not in school, and so it's actually not overly extensive for this particular guidance. When you get down into the next phase, which is phase 4, okay? Phase 4 allows you to resume face-to-face instruction. So if we were to start school tomorrow, we would be allowed to start school face-to-face. However, there would be a number of requirements. And so if you look down into this document, you'll see required, 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 and then there's strongly recommended. Now, as we go through there, there's things for staff, there's things for students. When we get to phase 5, and I'm just gonna, you can see just how many things there are here, but when we get to phase 5, this is kind of that space that, you know, we hope we can move to as a state, of course. Most of the requirements become strongly recommended. And so we then look to district local decision making on what things we want to continue with. There are some things I think in this document that we should be doing indefinitely, regardless of what you know, phase we're in. And so I think as you look through this document, you'll find a lot of those strongly recommended protocols. So this document is extensive, it's long, it's large, but it's also very well thought out. I would like to say that I'm very pleased, as you heard some concern. I know Mr. Ahern brought it up at a meeting recently. I brought it up as well. If the CDC requirements or the requirements from this roadmap were that you were only going to have you know, 10 or 12 students on a bus, it would virtually be impossible for us to run a transportation program. So being able to still offer those experiences and those services make it possible. But in lieu of that, in lieu of obviously not being able to completely social distance or physical distance, masks will be required for students in those spaces. And so what we're doing now is we're taking this document and we're working through it, and we're saying, okay, what are things going to look like? I have more information and plans that we've worked up than I can share at this meeting tonight. But suffice it to say that we've, I'll give you a couple snapshots. We've created how in the world are we going to do lunch, right? We have lunchrooms where a lot of kids are going to be present. How do we get to our capacity limits? How do we make sure that we're able to do that when kids have to take their masks off to eat food, obviously? And so, you know, we've worked out how do we create alternate schedules? How do we allow maybe elementary students to eat lunch in their classrooms? How do we create situations where we can facilitate students eating in multiple areas at the secondary level so that we can reduce the number of people and also socially distance as much as possible? And so these considerations are all being worked out by multiple teams right now to try and comply with these orders. So again, in phases 1 through 3, the school district will not be in session face-to-face. We'll have to be prepared for how to make these operations work in an online format. There are also quite a bit of requirements and restrictions as we're talking about as we get to phase 4, but at least we can meet with children face-to-face. And then obviously in phase 5, and if we ever get to phase 6 in the near future, we would be looking at those things that are good practices that prevent the spread of illness. But in the event that there are things that are not required anymore, we can make some decisions locally about that and work with our community partners and our district families to determine some of those things. As we look at some of the other pieces of this puzzle, we start talking about the instructional side, and we have teams that are working on that as well. So for example, in the next week, by the end of next week, I will be sending a fairly large scale communication to the parents and the families in the district. And that communication is going to be asking for parents to provide a final preference on learning modality. We are offering an online format. We are offering a face-to-face format, and we are also offering a blended format or a hybrid format, if you will. And our philosophy is this: there are a lot of families in our community that would like to have their child not go around other children. We can accommodate that. If there are parents in this community that would like their kids to be back in school right now, regardless, we can accommodate that. And so the way that we look at this is we want to provide parents choice. And so if a parent and or their child are choosing, I prefer to work in more of a blended format, we're going to work very diligently and hard to facilitate that. If we have a child that's working and saying, I'd really like to work in an online environment, I'm successful there, we want to facilitate that. And so the big picture bottom line is this: we are going to provide an excellent education for children, and parents don't need to go anywhere else. Our families are going to be serviced by us. I will say that the online learning experience will be very different from the online learning experience that we provided in the springtime, because we need something that's more rigorous, more robust, more bona fide, if you will. And so we're prepared to provide that as well. And we have some very talented educators who are working on that each day right now. So we mentioned at Academic Achievement, the Canvas program, and things like that we're going to be using to provide a more beneficial online experience than what we were able to provide. And I don't want to minimize the efforts of our team. This spring, I think we did a very good job in doing what we can, but that was unprecedented, and we had to come up with something in a matter of a couple weeks to fully change the entire delivery system. So we're prepared now, and quite frankly, we'll be prepared if we get sent out again, or if we have a student that needs to move into that online format because they've come down with a case in their family household. So we're creating, I should say, a system for our instructional services that allow for parents to choose which modality is best for their child. So a lot of this is going to be communicated next week. I will say transportation has been a big part of our plan as the result of the elementary reconfiguration has occurred. I'm pleased to say, in working with our transportation department, we're actually able to maintain and in many cases reduce the amount of time that children are on buses at the elementary level. We're also able to ensure that siblings from the same families, even if they're at an upper and a lower elementary school, will be able to ride to school together. We're also able to ensure that walkers can walk to school with their siblings. They get to school, and we will be able to transport them to the respective buildings that they attend. And we'll also be able to ensure that parents only have to make one drop-off. So if a parent has a first grader and a fourth grader, say at Deke and Cyrene, they can choose whichever building works best for their route as they're heading to work, and we will do the rest and make sure that the kids get to the buildings they need to get to. So we've been working on a lot of very complex situations, and we've been very successful. As I said, I'm very proud of our team for working through a lot of the challenges. We've tried to hear a lot of the concerns that were there, and there continue to be many, and we're going to do our best to try and tackle all of them. So we're not afraid of the challenge, and we're going to do everything we can to make sure we can still run school for our children, and we can do it in a safe way. And so I will be glad to answer any questions you may have. There's, again, way more than I can ever present in a board meeting like this, but lots will be communicated over the upcoming weeks.
Any questions for Ben? Okay. Go back to my agenda. All right. Now we have a discussion about the state budget shortfall.
All righty. One of the things that we've talked about at our last meeting, we've been talking about it for a couple months now. We've been advised by every state agency and the governor's office, the legislature. We know through the revenue estimating conference that took place in May, when we look at real numbers, there's a projected shortfall in 2021 of $1.3 billion. There was also a shortfall in the 1920 year of $1.1 billion, and that is just in the school aid fund, not the general fund. So we have been advised that cuts need to be considered. Don't wait, make arrangements. That being said, we were anticipating hearing more definitive information in terms of what our allocations will be for 2021. As you know, the state typically provides those to us in advance of June 30 so that we can prepare and make our budgets. And as we discussed at our last meeting, those numbers were not available. Those numbers are still not available. However, we are hopeful that they'll be coming soon. And so what I've done is I've prepared some potential dollar figure amounts. We talked about it at the Finance Committee. I have sent it all to you. I'm going to put it up on my screen, associated with various cuts that could be enacted by the district. I'm going to go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. So I'll just say, first and foremost, that I am not proposing that these things be done right now just yet. And, you know, there are some things, though, that I think we have done, will continue to do, that we look at that we might be able to find some benefit to and don't necessarily harm children or student programs. If you look at this particular list, I will go through it so that you can see the associated dollar amounts. I'd be happy to answer questions about it, and then you as a board can kind of decide. These are not in any exact rank order. I will tell you, though, that these areas in this color right here, the yellow color, are things that we have either already made decisions on, are things that we are prepared to do, planning to do, or could probably do without much terribly disruptive things to our students and their programs. As you get into the next layer, the blue area, what I think you'll find is that those particular decisions would have some negative impacts on student programs and students themselves. I would say those cuts are going to be more painful, if you will. And if you get down to the bottom area, you will see that those cuts are significant. I would call those doomsday cuts. Those are worst case scenario. And so would not advise those unless it was absolutely necessary. And so for the purposes of this discussion, I wanted to provide you with some general numbers and for the community to know that we definitely have been considering a lot of things. I'll also say before I go into this, we look at operational efficiencies all the time. So when we are in good financial positions as well as bad financial positions, we're always looking at how do we continue to manage our efficiencies across our business operation? How do we continue to manage our efficiencies against our instructional systems and ensure that we're taking care of people, but we're also making sure that we're doing it as efficiently as possible so that we have more money for rainy days and also for students and their direct programming. I'm going to go through this list. I'll certainly want to make sure I provide opportunities for anyone to ask questions. And then, if you'd like me to do something different, I will gladly do that. And we did discuss this at the finance meeting this week. One of the things that we've done is we've eliminated the DM Burr contract. That's going to save us. These numbers are conservative, but an estimated $80,000 over this year. We do believe that that's going to probably be more of a one-time savings, but nonetheless, it's going to count towards our total here as we look at how much savings we need to go or need to get. That amount is about $80,000. The early and upper elementary school model, the reconfiguration of the elementary schools, we've been asked a couple times about, a teacher doesn't make $100,000. How if you reduce 6 positions, do you get $100,000? The reality is that a teacher at the top of the scale to the district cost is closer to $140,000 to $150,000. By the time you factor in their FICA, retirement, healthcare, benefits package. And so it just really kind of depends. And so while not all teachers are at that level, we're looking at kind of a ballpark figure of 100,000. I believe that it will be more than 600,000, but just to estimate conservatively, we'll say 600. When we eliminate and reduce some secretarial positions, we believe we'll be able to realize a savings of about 70,000. We do have plans to eliminate an instructional coach position, as well as an MTSS coordinator position, as well as a principal. Those have a combined savings of about $300,000 in doing that. So those are things that I can tell you either we've done, we're planning on enacting, and cuts that we're making right now. And so that particular piece of the puzzle is something that, you know, we can discuss or I can answer questions about, but we're already kind of there. The next areas get into some things that are a little bit more painful. If we had to enact them, we could, but just understanding that we're getting more now into some uncomfortable areas as they impact staff and students. When we talk about increasing class size for online classes, it's this thought that in many districts across the state, as you go online, there are more students that can be managed and supervised in an online format than can be managed in a face-to-face setting. There are people that would disagree with that, but if we had to go down that road, there would be an ability to, say, reduce some workforce if we were to increase some of our sizes of our classes for online students. When we talk about reducing our STEM support staff, again, this is not something that we are too keen on, but certainly if it was required, you know, we believe we can find some reduction in hours and be able to facilitate some of the support for our STEM education a little bit differently. But that would, again, directly impact students in some way. We talk about the band equipment purchasing. We had allocated about $40,000 last year. When COVID hit, we were unable to execute the purchase orders and make those purchases, so those rolled over to this year. It's possible that we could look at cutting that back and saying we want to save that money. But again, the purpose and intent of that money was to support some of our music programs and new instruments that we do need. We also have on here the elimination of the tuition-based early learning programs. So our Little Dragons Learning Center operates a combination of programs from preschool, infant care, toddler care, as well as tuition-based pre-K. The district could choose, if they chose not to offer those services any longer, we could continue GSRP, which is the vast majority of our Little Dragons Center. That would allow for us to save roughly about $100,000, you know, in terms of revenue in terms of an expense to the district general fund. That would be something that could be considered, but again, the board would have to determine if they want to provide that service to the community. Closing Gaines Elementary School is something that I know has been discussed in the past. This again gets into a situation where for some children it would be mean that they would be on the bus for well over an hour. That's not ideal, but if we had to enact that, that's got a price tag of just under $300,000 to be able to make that decision. Closing the pool facility, I will just put a little asterisk there. That $200,000 is an estimate based on some of our energy costs. We do not know the exact amount yet. We're going to be doing some work with consumers to try and figure out how much energy and water was used while the pool was in operation. We'll be able to hopefully get more definitive there, but that facility is probably about a $200,000 cost. I will also say that as we discussed earlier about the pool, we are having conversations with Flushing, and you know, before we would make any decisions on that one, we would want to make sure that we're working with other partners to see if there's an opportunity to share in cost. And as we look to do that, I think you know, we can be aware. But again, closing the pool would have a negative impact on a number of our student athletes and kids that utilize that facility, and some of our community members that use that facility as well. As you get into the next color, these are things that I would certainly not be recommending just because of the direct impact to children, but just so that you can kind of have an idea on what we're dealing with. We would have the ability, if we so needed to do so, we could reduce some of the AP courses that we offer children at the high school. We could consolidate that, which would reduce some staffing. It would also reduce the training cost and some of the costs associated with running those programs. Those are kind of a gold star for our high school. Our high school is one of the best AP schools around. We've been awarded awards for that. So I certainly would not recommend, unless it was absolutely necessary, looking to do something like that, because many of our children, they look forward to that, and that's a big part of helping them with their post-high school plans. Selling the Cage Fieldhouse is something that's been proposed in the community. We've talked about this before. The Cage is, in terms of getting a value, I would say we're putting $2 million down on this sheet. I think there's a lot of questions there. First, number one, who is in the market to spend $2 million on that type of facility right now? The second thing I would say is that in order to actually get a real definitive number, other than just a ballpark estimate, we would need to get some sort of appraisal done if the board was serious about looking into that. I would also tell you that the Cage Fieldhouse is a vital part of our athletic program in the wintertime. Our student athletes use that 5 days a week very extensively. And so we would be back to really looking at just our middle school and high school gymnasiums if we did not have that space. So again, that is an option, and I'm putting it on the list for the board to just kind of have a ballpark idea on things that we've looked at. But that would be a pretty painful thing in terms of our student athlete programs. I think as you get down to these last three, these are things that I really don't even want to say because I just can't imagine school without these things. Athletics is about a $630,000 cost to the district. It's a vital program for many students. We have a lot of student athletes, and I just can't imagine executing something like that. But so that you are dealing with a number, that's what you're looking at. If we were to reduce or eliminate our music and band program, slightly less than athletics, probably about a $500,000 savings. Again, something that I don't even want to say because, again, our performing arts programs, our band and music programs are vital to our community and to our children. And then lastly there, the price tag for transportation altogether is roughly $1 million. And so, transportation is not a requirement. It's something that we do. But I will tell you that my perspective on it in our community, I believe it is a requirement. While it's not a mandated statutorily requirement, it is something that our children and families rely on heavily. So this list is simply for conversation so that you can understand that there are things that we may or may not need to consider down the road depending on the severity of the budgetary shortfalls. But I wanted to make sure that you were brought up to speed so that you can see the other types of options. And, of course, I'm not putting down here every operational efficiency. Otherwise, the list would be so extensive I couldn't even fit it on a screen. So if you have questions, I'm happy to entertain it or just allow you as a board to discuss anything that you'd like me to do with this or answer. I'm happy to do so.
Thanks, Ben. Does anybody have any questions specific to the list?
I do, Carrie.
Uh-huh.
Ben, I have three. So my first question, I actually know the answer, but for the public perspective or anybody that may question, there's a blank next to MTSS coordinator. Can you speak to why there's no dollar figure there?
Yeah, so currently we're looking at how we would handle the our MTSS position. So our MTSS position right now was a full-time job, and we've consolidated our administrative team over time, and that's something that we reduced down to a half-time position. I believe that through some of our creative staffing, we can add more responsibilities to the plates of our administrators, and we could actually reduce that completely. Part of the way that you do that and why it's not savings is because as you look at reducing a principal position, that $165,000 is inclusive of a job that was aligned to that MTSS coordinator position. So essentially, we're already you're not going to count the money twice. You're counting the money one time. So as we look at our staffing, we believe that we can take those MTSS duties and reassign them. And as you combine that with some principal reductions, we believe that we can realize about $165,000 of savings through that.
Okay, thank you. So then getting into the stuff that we don't like to talk about. So Little Dragons Learning Center, the potential savings there, it's kind of a two-part question. Where do we, I mean, aside from, I guess my question is, are we saving because our expenses, where are those savings coming from? And then can we offset that if we just increased our costs to our tuition-based enrollees?
The answer is yes. Certainly, you're always dealing with a balance sheet. So it's either revenue or expenses. So if you want to raise the prices of the tuition-based programs to offset the cost that the district pays, you could certainly do that. What you would have to do, because we've already done that recently, what you'd have to do is you'd have to make an assessment and say, if I raise my prices significantly higher than some of the local private childcare facilities, are we going to be able to retain our customers, if you will, or the people that take advantage of that? We always are looking, before we would make a decision to raise prices on the families, would be to say, how competitive are we with our pricing models compared to those private daycare facilities? So I think that's really the critical piece. So essentially what our $100,000 is, it costs a lot more than $100,000 to run that program, but we offset our cost because the families are paying a large portion of it, the majority of it. But the district is still paying about $100,000 of general fund money to support those programs. And so that's the question really is, do we want to raise prices and hope that that happens? But, if the families leave or say, I'm not able to afford that anymore, you actually may end up creating more of a liability on the district because we'd also lose out on that revenue then. So it's a good question. So the answer bluntly and frankly is yes, you could raise costs. But if you're above what most of the places that they could get the same services for, they may or may not stay. So that's unknown at this time.
Okay. And then getting down to if we were to consider reducing AP course offerings, that selection piece, are there alternatives that the students would still be able to access that level of education that we wouldn't necessarily have to provide, so it decreases that expense, but it would still be an opportunity? Or is it basically we'd be taking away a service? That's another question.
Yeah, it's very difficult to match what our teachers do with our AP courses. Mr. Bierman was just named one of the Michigan Teacher of the Year finalists. We have some incredible AP teachers. Mrs. Offenbacher and many others. We offer so many great AP classes. And unfortunately, you can't really replicate that in say like, okay, well, we could just have them take an online class. Well, is it true that they could take an AP class online with somebody who's not one of our teachers? Yes, but I can tell you that it's not going to be as effective for the vast majority of children. So I look at it and I say, if we go down that road, it would definitely be a loss of services and something that I would be highly cautious of because I just would tell you that we're not going to be able to offer the same experience to our children if we go down that road.
Okay, and then I actually had 4 questions, but you said the same question. So, I mean, it's nice to see a $2 million savings opportunity, but who's going to buy it? So that was my only other question, and you posed the same question. So thank you.
Okay.
Mike, did you have a question?
Me?
Yes.
I got a statement. Did Lisa just say that nobody would buy the cage? Is that what she said? I having a hard time hearing her.
No, I asked who would buy it.
Who would buy it? And my answer to that is we won't know until we try, but that's not what I want to talk about. What I do want to talk about is and Ben, you did a good job with this, and I understand the way you prioritized it. If I were prioritizing it, I'd make one big change, two big changes. I'd take 13, I'd take gains, and I'd put it down to the last resort. And I would switch it with athletics, and not eliminating athletics, and we talked about this, instead of, we would maybe get rid of part of our athletics, and that may be taken care of for us, as we all know, by the state, if there's no contact sports this year. That will be taken care of, and there will be a savings there. I'm not anticipating, and I'm not suggesting getting rid of athletics completely. As far as gains, and the reason I'd switch it down, we just made a big move when we went to the elementary model with our families. I know at one point the Gaines may have to be closed, but Gaines, as we all know, is a community in itself. And if we were to close that school, we'd be pulling the heart out of that community. I think that has to be a last resort. So I would make those two switches. And
Okay.
that's just for consideration and for thought.
Thanks, Mike.
You're
Ben, I
welcome.
have a question.
Sure.
And I know you and I spoke briefly about this, do you have a target number that you're looking at? And I know none of us know what the budget's going to look like, but do you, based on your extensive knowledge, have a target so that we as a board are shooting for a number that's even within your ballpark?
Yeah, I would say that this is completely a discussion topic right now. And as soon as I get that target, what I'd like to be able to say is we need to move, on some of these things to try and hit that target number. Some of the things that you're not seeing on this list are employee group, anything that employee groups would be willing to come to the table with, which I can just say safely, and I have to be very careful how I say this, but I have the belief that not just from myself and from the administration, but also from the teachers and the support staff, everybody has a very serious and vested interest in doing whatever we need to do from an employee concessions group to help support, the district operation. With that being said, it's got to be a multifaceted approach, right? We're going to look at making some changes maybe on things that are on this list, as we've already discussed, already had. But there's also going to be a target, for our employees. And so that's going to be all additional on top of this. I would like to say that, that number is probably a couple $1 million. But at the same time, that is based solely on a best case scenario. We're hoping that we get some additional federal stimulus dollars, and that's what we're asking the federal government for. We know that the state is also doing that. Part of the big reason why we don't have a target number from the state is they continue to hold out hope that they're going to be given some sort of, compensation package to the federal government. There's not any type of, definitive information that says that that's going to happen for schools. So soon, the Department of Treasury is going to tell the legislature and the governor's office, you actually have to put these numbers together, because there's not going to be an opportunity, to just hold out hope that something will happen. So they're on recess right now, but I will tell you that school districts all over the state are asking that very question. What is the target? What is the number going to be? We've been told to be prepared to make cuts, to have these reduction discussions. But at the same time, we've been told what the overall number is, but we haven't determined yet what that final number for each individual district will be. So while I think we need to be prepared through these discussions, I'm not, nor is any other superintendent in the state been given any kind of definitive number to shoot for. So I would like to hope that we're going to be able to get there through what we've already done, and maybe some employee opportunities for employees to give back, and maybe some federal stimulus package that through a combination of all three of those areas, we'd be able to be okay. And then we'd never have to talk about this again, would be my prayer and hope. But at the same time, I think it's important that we're at least understanding that if there's no federal stimulus package, if there's no additional things that come through, you can certainly look to have the discussion about employee compensation, but those things have to be collectively bargained, and those are things that are confidentially done through that process by law. And so they're not things that we can unilaterally decide as a district or as a board. So those are things that have to, we are still awaiting answers. I would wish that those answers came quick. I wish we would already have them, but I don't have a target to give you, and that's the long answer.
So for purposes of this conversation, is it safe to say that everything in yellow is fair game?
I would say that's safe. Yes, I would say those are things that we have internally been planning on. These are things that we're trying to do to make necessary reductions. We believe we can do these things with minimal impact, and in some cases, actually very beneficial impact to students. There will be some that is, not optimal. We've talked about some of those, but we're trying to do this while protecting direct student programs as much as possible. So
my hopefully simple math says that the yellow totals to $957,000.
I believe that's correct.
Okay. So I would encourage the rest of my fellow board members to look at yellow, see if there's anything that stands out or you object to, and then focus on the darker blue and see if there's anything there that we have advice for Ben or comments that you would like to make in anticipation that we will eventually have to have a plan for some reductions.
I have a few, if I may.
Sure.
Ben, I know we talked about this the other day, and I think it might be helpful for the public, because when I first looked at cutting potentially at the Little Dragons, I thought, well, how come I don't like that idea. And then you were talking about how really that need is and can be filled within the community already. I tend at less cost to that organization or those places than us. Would you be willing to speak to that? Is that accurate?
Yeah, certainly. So I want to be respectful, and as I have always with the conversation we had, we have a phenomenal early learning program. We have phenomenal people. But if you're looking, if it came down to what we have to do, there's a couple things to consider. Number one, we are not authorized at this point to provide those early learning services under the current plan in terms of COVID-19. So we had to eliminate those programs for the summer as it is. So we don't know what the plan will be moving forward for early learning programs like preschool and infant care. And so that's a very much an unknown at this point. And then I would say that the other thing is that there are a number of early learning centers in the community already. If you think about Happy Elephant, Brandy's Place, there are a number of very high quality ones that do great things. I'm very proud of the work that we do as well. But I think it's something that if you're asking, I would not advise that we do that right now. I don't want to do that. But as you consider this list, obviously, I would say that it would be less impactful on the overall student population than some of these other items.
Sure. I guess the point in the other day when you, that I thought that you pointed out to an extent that in my initial thought I hadn't, that if it were eliminated, there is something else in the community that could fill that need. It would not strictly be an unmet need. And that's why I asked that in part. And I have another question based on the committee meeting that we had the other day with regards to the STEM support staff and kind of how specials might look and how that might make it easier for our staff if we lost STEM support staff. Did I understand that correctly or no?
No, I don't think it would be easier. I mean, it would be a challenge.
That's a fair way to say that. Sure.
Yeah, it would be a challenge. I would say we would have to look at how do our teachers, so right now our STEM coordinators at every building, they provide a lot of support to staff. If there was an opportunity to, if we were required to reduce hours or things like that, a lot of the burden would fall to the teachers. Again, I'm telling you, we have very good STEM coordinators and STEM support staff. So those types of things would be a concern of mine as well. But again, all of these things are concerning from the yellow on down to the bottom. So I can't say that it would be an easy thing. It would be something.
That's fair. I didn't mean it in that way. I guess I know we have fantastic staff. I mean, I know that they will, you know, rise up to meet the needs. It's that the staff that we have, even though they would be burdened, could fulfill that responsibility if we didn't have that support staff. I guess that's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah, sure.
Can you speak to the online classes of like what size that would be or how that looks? The number changes, or I guess in that 150,000 number?
Yeah, so essentially the way that would have to commence would be that we would be able to have a reduction in workforce if we didn't need as many teachers to teach online courses. If we could increase those class sizes, that would be, you know, one of the moves that could be made. You know, that's something that we have to still work out on the details of those things. But, you know, if we got down to it, we could certainly go into that and look and explore what that might look like.
And can you clarify, I'm sorry.
No,
Jessica,
go ahead, please.
Can you clarify online classes versus children learning at home?
Not, I mean, really what you're asking is a synonymous question. So, you know, students that are at home, our mechanism for doing that remotely is through online education. So if you're a student that can't come into the building, we're going to have a pretty robust way that we would provide assignments, grades, discussion forums, videos, online laboratories, face-to-face, you know, online, but interactive sessions with teachers. Those things all would happen through Canvas. And so the question that I think may be what you're asking is, what does that look like as it pertains to this list? It would basically say that instead of having, you know, 30 students in a traditional classroom, if you're talking elementary, or, you know, 35 if you're in a, you know, maybe 32 in a high school class, you're maybe saying maybe we could up that to 40 students if you're teaching fully online. That's what we're talking about in that situation.
I just wanted to clarify versus somebody taking a class that's not offered by the district typically.
Right.
Like through the VLC.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have two more things, if I may, and that's with Mike's comment about potentially moving, and I think we briefly talked about this, of if we were to eliminate athletics, if it doesn't, I don't think it necessarily has to be an all or nothing. Do we have a list, or can we get a list together of what we might keep and maybe what we might put off, and not permanently, but until our finances change to bring different sports back in, and also in the time of COVID, what makes sense, what sport.
Yeah, I mean, we certainly can do any of those things. If you'd like us to prepare that, we can work on that. I would say to what Mr. Ahern was saying, in the event that the state of Michigan or the governor says, you know, athletics are not going to be allowed in the fall, or something that's beyond our control, obviously that's something that you would realize the savings by force, I would say. I will do whatever the board wishes. So if you as a board decide you want me to start looking at pulling out particular programs and developing some teams to make recommendations, I can. I guess I would say my recommendation would be, before we start getting into that, I would highly wait to see what the state's going to do, and if you're not forced to cancel athletics, athletics and music and extracurricular activities are some of the things that children, especially at the secondary level, it's why they come to school in many cases. So I will do whatever it is that the board asks, but I would say that's one we probably want to wait and see if we're going to be forced into a decision before we would volunteer that up. You know, unless it was absolutely necessary.
And the last thing, sorry, I had an error that popped up that said my internet connection was unstable. So I missed the first part of your answer, but that's totally okay. I guess I'm just asking some of these questions as if we're supposed to be having a discussion really about it, even though it is very uncomfortable to have these discussions in some respects. You know, it's important to be able to talk about it and talk about it publicly. And I will say this part, if people don't know, because I don't know if, I know I'm slightly biased in this area, and that comes back to the closing the pool facility, because I have two daughters that learned to swim at that pool and who have been part of the swim team with Swartz Creek Flushing since they were both in middle school. And I understand that pools can be money pits, but I think they're very valuable to the community. You know, that it's one of the facilities that can be rented, that we offer the community to come in and swim. As Brian said the other day when we discussed this, that, you know, it gives an opportunity potentially for everybody in our community to learn how to swim at some point. And the team itself, I think, is really important, because my daughters, and not just my kids, I know all sorts of kids, because of the cooperative between Swartz Creek Flushing, have learned a different level of teamwork, because they're literally working with another school to be successful. They're learning not how just to be competitive with each other, but how to work together, you know. And you made a comment about Mr. Bierman being the teacher of the year, and through the Metro League, I know the head coach was coach of the year this last year. You know, our swim team's gone to regional for the last 6 years. So I think there is a great value, not just to our student athletes who are really high performing students, but I know it might be a little bit of a pain in the neck, but it's also a great asset to the community overall. And that's the end of my comment.
And thanks, Jessica, for asking that question. I have an additional question. Ben, what are the implications if you close the pool facility and you decide to open it later? Is there a significant cost in doing that?
No, the cost right now is going to be the same. I mean, we would like to look at, I would say we would like to look at making repairs if that's going to be a board desire, because we want to make sure that it's not going to have continued leaks and things like that, you know, it's suffered from over the years. So we need to make some necessary repairs so that it's functional and that it's operating at a high level. So we would make those repairs, you know, to the pool to open it back up. But in terms of refilling it, you know, those types of things, that's been a part of what we're doing, and we could open it up in relatively short order if we had to.
And if I may, actually, Carrie, I'm glad you asked that because I had two more points. The potential of the cost sharing of expenses because we have a cooperative with Flushing. And I have reached out to the Swartz Creek alumni who have raised funds previously to go for the natatorium to see if there's an interest potentially of helping us to cover some costs and keep the pool facility going. I don't have an answer yet. I'm not certain what that looks like, but I'm happy to share it with you when I do have that answer.
Thanks, Jessica. And I'm sorry, and please jump in, anybody else, if you have questions, but the band equipment, is that something we would talk to the band boosters about? I know it's a considerable sum of money, but is that something they could help us with?
I mean, we don't have any direct influence on how the band boosters chooses to, award or utilize their funds. Certainly there's a relationship with our band directors, and they work closely with the boosters to say, these are some needs we have. And I think there's always an ongoing conversation that exists there. What I will say is that there are some district-owned equipment that typically is the responsibility of the school. So we're in need of some tubas. I think we have some additional pieces of equipment, including some timpanis that might need to be purchased. And so we had allocated some money this past year, but prior to COVID-19 hitting, and we were unable to make those purchases. So I can't speak for the board of, the band boosters, but I can certainly pass along to the band directors, to kind of work through that with them. But certainly there is a need. And again, like everything here, we have things that we need, and we have to make decisions on whether or not we forego those things or execute the purchase. I would also just add, because we're going to be talking about site work and other bond projects, I've gotten the question a number of times, well, how can we spend, X amount of dollars on the middle school or the elementary schools or the scoreboard or the field or any of these other types of things? It's important to note that the bond dollars are a completely separate entity. None of the things on this list can be offset by bond dollars. Any type of repair, maintenance, operation, or personnel or staffing, none of those things have the ability to be used with bond dollars. So bond dollars are elected or voted on, and they have to be spent in a specific way. And so it can be a little bit of a point of contention or clarification, but you're not able to spend bond dollars on any of these types of things. And I think it's important for, just the general public, and I hope the board understands that those two things are separate pots of money.
Thanks, Ben, and I'm glad you mentioned that. And I think Alicia had another comment.
I do. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. First of all, I just want to make a comment. I almost wish this list didn't have numbers next to them. Because I will say, I don't think this is necessarily across the board agreeable by all board members that these are ranked in this certain order. Maybe in section by color, but this isn't really a ranking, I would say, because I think we all have our own opinions of which of these may be more impactful than others and where we would put our priorities. And then I had another comment. I don't remember what I was going to say. I'm going to have to come back to that. I don't remember what my other question was going to be. Sorry.
Anyone else have any thoughts, any comments? Go ahead.
I remembered.
Alicia, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, I do think we do need to keep in mind as well. You asked Carrie, what's the target? I think we need to know from the state and from the federal government, what monies may be coming and where our shortfall may be. But I think it does behoove this board to also keep in mind that we do need to consider what target do we have, because our fund balance plays a factor into this, where we want that to be at the end of these decisions. So I had stated before, and I will state again, I would much rather be conservative, keep some money in the bank, but keep programs for our children and find somewhere that we can find the best happy medium where we're not pulling away from students, we're not pulling away from staff. We still have some money in the bank, but sometimes you have to spend a little bit to keep a little bit. So that's all I wanted to comment.
Thanks, Alicia. Brian, you had some comments.
Yeah, I just, the list here, it's not easy to make cuts and to evaluate all these services and programs and facilities. It's not easy, but I think, Ben, you did an incredible job putting this list together. And one thing I really like, in this climate of change and not knowing what's happening at the state level with budget, with revenue, with any of these conditions and the COVID and the protection, the governor's executive orders, we don't know what's going from day to day. But I really appreciate the top 6 and how you place them there, and that we're already kind of into that. You've been proactive at actually looking at this potential loss in revenue. And I think this list that you put together is very good, very efficient. It's not easy, and nobody wants to cut anything, but we still have to look at the reality of what's coming up. And you've done a good job with this.
Thank you.
Tony or Chuck, did you have anything?
Yeah, I have one question. When's the state required to give us their amount that they're going to pay per pupil?
June 30th. That's actually, it seems like I'm joking, but that's actually their deadline. And
that's why I asked the question. So what's the holdup?
They have not produced their budgets, and
why did we have to produce our budgets and go through all these loopholes if they're not following the rules?
These are questions, Mr. Melky, that I cannot answer. I certainly would love to see them give us that number. They impose that deadline that they would produce a budget prior to June 30 every year for the school districts. We don't have that number. And unfortunately, we've been not given an indication of exactly what date we're going to be given that number. So school districts all over the state are left to, as we are as well, lead the best we can, understanding that there's things that are looming over us. And we try to do our best to make sure that we shield our children and keep as much of that off of them. And that's what we're being tasked to do. So I don't have all of those answers in terms of when the state and why the state did not turn their budgets in time, other than I can tell you that they have been under unprecedented pressure, as everyone has been with COVID-19 and the significant lack of revenue in the state coffers with the general fund budget.
I agree. I understand that, Ben. And and we're jumping to go through all these hoops to cut everything. And I'm not saying that we should not be ready, but and I don't know how the fellow board members feel, but I don't think any of this is a priority right now. We run school as it is. We have some contingency plans. And when they give us the money, then we make our move. Because I don't want to put these programs that are out there. I don't want to get rid of any extracurricular programs. I want to keep everything we can for our kids in the best interest of our kids. And for us to do that, we should not even be talking about, we can talk about these potential cuts, but I don't take any of them serious till we figure out what's going on from the state of Michigan. And they've let us down. We haven't let our kids down. They've let our children down. They've let the school districts down because they're not performing, and we shouldn't have to bend to them. We have to maintain what we would normally do to keep it normal for our children when they do come back to school. And a lot of these budget cuts that are being proposed here, this will get out in the community, and it frightens the community, it upsets the community, it puts more stress on the community, and it's all due to the state of Michigan, not us. So I think we should just hold off on all this stuff. It's great that you brought it to us, and be prepared. But at the end of the day, they have not fulfilled what they are promised us to see where we can eliminate budget. We cannot eliminate a budget or increase a budget without knowing what we have coming in. It's as simple.
Well said. Thank you, Chuck. I agree.
I agree.
Tony,
I
go
agree
ahead.
with too. What we did last board meeting, we had to do to cover the 1920 school year. But with what Chuck said, going in 2021, we're arguing what came first, chicken or the egg. We don't know what's going to happen. All we're doing now is inciting panic in the community. Because if you know numbers in 3 weeks, do we have to make a decision August 19th?
No, and again, the whole purpose of this is not to incite any kind of panic. As I said at the very beginning, my recommendation is to, as Mr. Melke and several of you have said, we don't plan on enacting any of this unless it's absolutely necessary. The converse conversation, though, is in the event that we do get numbers and find something out, I think it will be beneficial to this board and to the community to know that we have been talking about, what could potentially happen. So I think I could not agree more. And I think we need to be strongly, letting people know we're not considering doing any of these things right now, but we know at least where the list lies in the event that something does have to happen. And at this point, we're going to continue to move forward and be prepared and know when we get that number that we'll be able to do something. And as I said before, I'm really hoping for best case scenario where we don't have to move down this list at all. And that would be great.
Yeah, I want to comment to that. I think we have a prudent responsibility to make sure that we're at least planning. I also commend Ben, and I think we have an obligation to the public to let them know that we are planning, have options. And again, if we're able to pull back and not have to make cuts, I think we're all agreeing we're not making any final decisions immediately. But to sit back and wait and just hope when it's not that we don't have any information. We know across the country that there are billions of dollars just not available. So if they're not available, you need to appropriately make plans because all of these decisions impact hundreds to thousands of people in our community, whether that's the staff, the students, families. So to make those decisions knee-jerk later when we have more information, I think would not be responsible. I think we do need to have some ideas and some plans to take some time to make these decisions. And again, if best case scenario, we don't have to address any of these, but even not just for today, but even for the future, we're also looking at ways or things, we never know what the future is going to hold, but to have some plans in place. To put on blinders and think that we just need to wait until somebody tells us otherwise, I would hate to take kids back to school, then we're promising things that we may potentially have to pull back onto.
I hope that we're able to get ourselves through this pandemic and that the economy and businesses will be able to be restored, and that we'll be talking about all of the things that we get to add and the innovations that we'll get to achieve. So I think we're all praying for that and hoping for that. So let's keep our heads up and towards that. And I think it's just being prudent and being aware, and there's no need for anyone to panic because these decisions aren't being made. But I think it's good that we're informed. And so hopefully we can kind of leave it there. And, we need to be open about the fact if something comes out, and I'll be informing everyone of those numbers when we get them.
And Ben, I want to echo what others have said. Our community is very blessed to have you and your team to plan ahead and to have already had a good plan in place so that we're not having to heavily invest in technology for our students or Wi-Fi for the district. That's already in place. And that we have very talented educators who are very creative and can turn on a dime. And it's been demonstrated. So thank you for bringing this. I appreciate it. This is hard. This is the hardest part of being a board member. And I know it's a very hard part of being an administrator. But you guys do a great job of it. And so I know this won't be the last time we look at this list, but hopefully there will be money that's coming through more than we think. And we can move forward regardless.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, great. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate the input and the comments. Now we have a conversation about the bond.
Sure.
Are you going to do that, Ben?
Yeah, I would be happy to do that. I will just kind of start off by saying that Jim Venton from Wolgast is here, and appreciate his willingness to be in attendance. We obviously are coming today with some site work packages for all of the elementary schools that are to be hopefully approved tonight. I want to talk about a couple of them just that are noteworthy so that you're aware. We do have an alternate that we're not bringing tonight for Moorish Elementary School. It's a couple $100,000 plus alternate to add an additional drive out onto Linden Road. We have expressed some desire and cooperation with the local church there, and we're hoping that, that they're a great partner with us, and we hope that eventually we'll be able to do something like that because that'll greatly improve the traffic flow at Moorish Elementary School. We are not proposing that alternate now because there are other logistics that have to occur for that. So, but when you look at the packages for Moorish and for Deke, we're under a very strict time crunch, and COVID-19 pushed a lot of things back for construction. This is one of the things that was pushed back. I'm very impressed with Wolgast and E&L and their ability to get these things done. But at the same time, there's only so much that can be done. And so if we can get approvals in time to get our Moorish and Deke sites complete, then we would be more than happy to move forward with them. And we're asking for your blessing on those tonight. But in the event that we don't get approvals, we're putting into the actual resolution for your consideration this evening that we hold off on those if we don't get the approvals. And so that is actually written into your resolution, and we discussed that this evening. I have a couple other things to talk about, and I'm going to let Jim speak for a second here. Jim, would you mind giving the board an update on our elementary progress, our athletic complex, the other projects that the district's working on?
Yep. As far as the elementaries, they're coming along quite well. Like I say, we've got everybody lined up. We've got our material on site. We were a little nervous about that with the COVID-19 when we first got started back up, as far as any delays in material production due to what facilities may or may not have been shut down during the shutdown order. But we do have most of our material on site, so those are coming along well, and I don't foresee any issues with completing the elementary renovations for the start of school. The athletic field, they're working on the turf right now. I'm sure probably people have been by there to see it. The turf should be done in the next couple of days, probably Monday at the latest. And so that's coming along well. The press box is scheduled to be delivered shortly. The grandstands have been mostly installed other than a couple ramps. So those are mostly up and complete. The press box, like I say, will be coming shortly, which will finish that installation. And as far as the buildings for the athletic facility, those are, the masonry's going up right now, so those are on schedule to be completed. Like I say, ideally we're going to be done for the first football game. We did discuss up front that if need be, there might be a couple of home games that are switched to be out of town for the first couple, but I think we're looking good for the start of the season right now.
Any board members have questions on the current construction projects for Jim? All right. I would also like to update the board that we took bids for the middle school. We bid the entirety of the project, so all of the complete project at the middle school was bid out. The bids came in over budget, over $1 million over budget. And so we are doing some value engineering right now, which is why we did not bring those to the board. As a matter of an update, the reason for the increased cost was a single sourcing on the the unit ventilator systems that are going in, or the heat pump units, I should say, that are going in at the middle school for air conditioning. So we're working with our teams to see if we can't determine if we need to go and bid that back out or not. And so Jim is working on that now. We also had some scope things that needed to be addressed relative to the courtyard at the middle school, that there was some work that was going to cost more than we originally anticipated. And so we're looking at the need for that. The bond steering committee talked about that today. So our plan right now is to see if we can't get that number back in budget, and hoping that we can, and then we'll be bringing the middle school projects to start this fall for your approval at our next board meeting. In the event that we're unsuccessful in that, in our value engineering, it's certainly possible that we may have to go back out to bid for a spring start. Again, this was another project that was delayed by COVID-19. So hopefully we'll have good news to report in August, and if not, we'll be looking at rebidding that project. Any other questions for Jim?
I have one. I'm sorry, I just thought of this as you were talking about those timelines, and I didn't ask previously. Jim, does this affect, isn't there a certain percentage of work that needs to be done within a certain time frame? And will there be any waivers? Does it come from the state, right? As far as if we don't have that percentage of work done? Isn't there a penalty to the bond? Did I understand that correctly previously?
Yeah, you're correct. So 85% of your projects have to be, or I should say it's really a financial thing. 85% of your dollars need to be spent within the first 3 years of acceptance of bond funds, of issuance of bond funds. There hasn't been an official ruling, but every single school district in the state that's under construction is delayed right now. And so they've issued kind of that verbal that we're going to have to come up with a solution to extend that. So there hasn't been an official Treasury ruling, but you're correct on your understanding. But we haven't been given an official word yet from the state.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions for Ben or Jim? Okay.
I would just add that I have, for 8B, I will have a few documents to show you before you vote on the multi-sport complex, athletic complex scoreboard.
Okay.
Are we?
All right.
I'm sorry.
Sure, Alicia.
Are we all on timeline for transportation purposes, that we won't have traffic flow issues come start of fall?
Are you referring to the elementary site work packages?
Yes. I guess that is determined based on what we're going to do tonight.
Yeah, so that's going to be determined on what we do tonight. And so the answer to your question is, if we are not going to be able to, particularly, so at Elms Road and at Cyrene Elementary School, those projects are going to be able to go and commence. We're going to try to get them done as soon as possible, but even if it's a few weeks into school, that's okay, because we can still get buses and everybody into the buildings and things like that. Morrish and Deke are different, which is why there's a caveat on that resolution. If we cannot assure ourselves that we will get it complete before school starts, we won't be able to start them, because you can't be in a situation where we're not able to start school because there's no way to get into those sites. So we're looking at multiple plans and what that might look like, but we're pushing pretty hard, and we're hopeful that we can, hopefully get it done.
Thanks, Alicia. All right, with that, we can move on to our board action items. The first 4 items under A are all related to what we just talked about. And I'm going to do these one at a time. And as everybody knows, I need to read every single one of these, the amounts included, and then I'll ask Joanne to do a roll call vote. So with that, I would entertain a motion for the approval of elementary site work packages. This one, the first one is for Deacon Moorish.
So moved.
Support.
Mike and Brian,
Yes.
any comments or questions? Okay. Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the Swartz Creek Community Schools 2018 bond projects, Moorish site work project to the following: Fessler and Bowman for concrete work in the amount of $66,450. Nectarline Electric for electrical work in the amount of $14,550. LA Construction Corporation for site work in the amount of $272,600. And Allied Construction for paving and surfacing work in the amount of $145,515 for a total amount of $419,115. The site work package approval at Deke and Moorish Elementary Schools are contingent upon permitting approval in time for work to be completed before school begins as presented. Joanne, could you do a roll call, please?
Sure. Chuck? Chuck?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
Alicia?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
And Mike?
Yes.
That's 7 yeses.
Okay. First part of A passes. The second one is for Elms Road site work project. I need a motion.
So moved.
Mike?
Support.
Was that Brian or Tony?
Yes, Brian.
Okay. All right. Any comments or questions? Approval of elementary site work packages. Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the Swartz Creek Community Schools 2018 bond projects. Elms Road site work project to the following: Simone Construction for concrete work in the amount of $123,200. Nectarline Electric for electrical work in the amount of $13,900. Eagle Excavation for site work in the amount of $304,700. And Chippewa Asphalt for paving and resurfacing in the amount of $93,887.50 for a total amount of $955,687.50 as presented. Joanne, could you do roll call, please?
Sure. Tony?
I have a question. What was that total for Elms?
For Elms?
Yes.
Yeah, it says
When I
535
just-
on the paper.
I got 535,687.
I have 535,687.50. There was 50 cents on the end of the Chippewa asphalt.
Oh, I thought I heard 900,000. I'm sorry.
No. 535,687.50. Sorry. Okay, Joanne, I'm sorry. Thank you, guys.
Tony?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Alicia?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Jessica?
Yes.
And Chuck?
Yes.
7 yeses.
All right. The second part of A passes. Okay, the next one is for site work at Deke. I need a motion.
So moved.
Is that Brian?
Yes.
Okay. Need a
Support.
second?
Support.
Thanks, Brian or Mike. Okay. Any comments or questions? Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approved the Swartz Creek Community Schools 2018 Bond Projects DEEC Site Work Project to the following. Bessler and Bowman for concrete work in the amount of $134,450. Nectarline Electric for electrical work in the amount of $13,900. Champagne and Max for site work in the amount of $316,253.11. And Chippewa Asphalt for paving and surfacing work in the amount of $157,325 for a total of $621,009.
Mrs. Germain, you're frozen at this time. I think you're going to need to read that resolution one more time if you can get back on.
Joanne? I'm sorry.
Mr. Micah said that you were frozen at the time. You didn't need to reread the resolution.
If you could, I'm sorry, that last one, you did freeze and we did not catch your resolution. Could you read that one more time?
That was good. That was good practice. Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Let me move. I'm unstable. Not me, but the internet. Can you see me and hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, guys. All right. Be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the Swartz Creek Community Schools 2018 Bond Projects DEEC Site Work Project to the following. Bessler and Bowman for concrete work in the amount of $134,450. Nectarline Electric for electrical work in the amount of $13,900. Champagne and Max for site work in the amount of $316,253.11. The site work package approval at DEEC and Moorish Elementary Schools are contingent upon permitting approval in time for work to be completed before school begins as presented. Joanne, can you do roll call, please?
Yeah. Alicia?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes. Brian?
Yes.
And Tony?
Yes.
7 yeses.
Thank you. All right, finally, under A, the fourth part, we have site work packages for Siring. I need a motion.
So moved.
Brian and Mike, any comments or questions? All right, be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education approve the Swartz Creek Community Schools 2018 Bond Projects Siring Site Work Project to the following. Simone Construction for concrete work in the amount of $118,600. Nectarline Electric for electrical work in the amount of $13,650. Eagle Construction for site work in the amount of $272,600. And Allied Construction for paving and surfacing in the amount of $127,049 for a total amount of $531,899 as presented. Joanne, could you do roll call, please?
Yep. Jessica?
Yes.
Alicia,
Yes.
Brian,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
Mike,
Yes.
and Carrie.
Yes.
7 yeses.
Thanks, Joanne. Appreciate it very much. Now we have B. We have discussion about the scoreboard. I think, Ben, you're going to share some information before we address this.
Yeah, so we have, you know, obviously as a part of the athletic complex, there's a scoreboard and a sound system that needs to be installed. And so we're running up into a time where we need to get that purchase made. The scoreboard is a video board. The bond steering committee looked at that. We had board members that participated in some demos. I wanted to let you know that while you know, this is coming from the bond fund, right? One of the things that the advantage of this particular board is that it's got sound and video on the screen. So the total technology package comes to about $193,000 for that installation. What I wanted to let you know, though, is that part of the advantage of going in this direction is the fact that we will have an opportunity to realize that board being completely paid for through the fundraising program that Daktronics has put together. There's two primary companies that deal with scoreboards throughout the country. It's Daktronics and Fairplay. As we evaluated, we looked at the sound system component, which only Daktronics provides. This right here is a perspective, and basically what it allows for is a partnership with the district's community to fundraise to not only offset athletic costs to the general fund, but provide advertising dollars to the district for years to come. So Daktronics has been working on this prospectus. These conversations are being had with our community business partners. And so these are obviously just this particular document, which you have details the different things that Swartz Creek does, our average attendance that we have at our outdoor athletic events. As you know, our facility will house lacrosse, soccer, and football, as well as track and field. So we talk through a lot of the different possibilities in terms of annual attendance at our events. As we think through what this board will do, you can kind of have this is obviously a rendering down on the field. The concept here is that we would have partners that would be anchor partners. There are also founding partners and premier partners. I'm going to talk about that in a second. But basically, the way that the board is laid out, the anchor partners would have solid, permanent, static advertising. You've seen right in many fields, it might be a car dealership, it might be a larger corporation. They purchase the entire panel for the board, and that is a static thing. These anchor partnerships are $6,500 a year. The other partnership is a founding partner, and they end up with these digital panels that are up for 50% of whatever contests we have. There are 6 of those available, and those are $2,500 a year. And we have premier sponsorships, which include sponsors actually during timeouts, during the beginning and end of the events. So full sound, video, commercial for businesses, and those are $750 a year. In working with several groups in the community, our athletic director, Mr. Suhanik, has gone out to seek sponsorships. Working with the representative from Daktronics, we reached out to Saline High School, Novi, Charlevoix, Muskegon, Saginaw Heritage, Kalkaska, Unionville, Seabwing, among about another dozen others. And they have put this same prospectus together and have fully paid for the cost of their board, and then have annual advertising dollars coming into the district. So one of the things that I will just show you briefly is the numbers that I already spoke to. If we fill our advertising dollars during this prospectus, because it's a 5-year program that gets renewed on every 5 years, we will far exceed, or we will exceed the number of dollars that it takes to actually fund the board. So the board essentially becomes paid for through advertising. And all of the schools we spoke to filled their sponsorship agreements within 2 weeks. We already have some verbal commitments on some of the anchor partnerships, and in working with the Daktronics marketing team, they feel extremely confident in the response they've gotten so far. So the resolution just includes that. I just wanted you to be aware. As I said, this is something that the committee looked at. We've seen a demo of it. I'm fine going either way, but this particular program will essentially provide revenue to offset some of our athletic programs in the general fund for years to come. So it's a way to generate revenue every year.
Are there questions for Ben?
I just wanted to add a comment. It's an incredible piece of technology. I'm a sound person, and when they had the demo here at Swartz Creek, I was just blown away by the sound, the quality of the video, and it's going to be a great thing for us. A great thing about it also is that it's going to generate revenue. We've been looking for years when I was in the past. We looked for ways to generate revenue, and putting marketing displays up in the fields and what have you. But it never really got off the ground. But this will bring in $40,000 a year. As long as we have the board there, and maybe even more in the future. I really truly believe this is, and I'm not that I'm that we need this moneymaker for advertising, but it's going to really help our sports programs, all of our sports programs, because the money's going back into the general fund and hopefully directed back to the sports. But it's just a great way to partner with local businesses and develop that partnership, that unity in the community, and help our school and our athletes out. I just think it's incredible.
So Ben, at a football game or a track meet, they would be able to project the players and the band and anybody who's running or in an event at a track meet. Is that true? So people in the stands could see everything that was going on.
Yeah, that is correct. One of the advantages of having a board like this, if you were to go to, maybe what we've been accustomed to, and just so you know, these boards are now becoming what's being installed. I listed off a number of schools that have just installed them. This is becoming kind of the norm. But historically, if you went to a game, you had the old light bulb type scoreboards. And so if you were a track and field athlete, and as a former track and field athlete myself, there was never anything that they could even use the board for, even if they were able to use it for a timer. So with the video board, it has the technology to be able to display a complete event-specific board. So in a track meet, all the events, including the finishes of races and all of those things. The nice thing about this educationally is that students will be able to run this type of a board. And as the students learn how to operate, they will be able to create more innovations than I would ever be able to tell you about. But they'll be able to, it has the capacity to do instant replay, many other things that I'm sure when we first get started, we won't be doing all of those things. But as the students and the ITC program start to develop an understanding of how to make that work and happen and run the board, I believe there'll be many opportunities to do some pretty neat things, including community events. We've already, heard from some interest from the city to do some community events with it. And so I think there'll be a lot of extensions as opposed to, just what you can do with kind of a static, I call it a light bulb board.
Thanks. And you answered my second question with the students can actually learn from this.
Yeah.
Yeah, great. Anybody else?
Ben, who takes the responsibility of securing and maintaining those sponsorships over the years. I just asked that because honestly, I think 5 years seems an awful long time. I mean, I think it's great financially, but if you look back 5 years, a lot of even our big community partners have changed. They've changed ownership, they've changed locations, or they've outright closed. Looking at the future, if we lose something in the process, then is that on the athletic department, the administration? I guess where does that fall?
I mean, I think it's a partnership program. In talking with all the schools, we had not one school that said that a business dropped off and didn't commit to their obligation. In fact, many of them said that they wanted to just write the check up front. They didn't want to make a payment every year. They just made the full payment right up front and just took care of it. With that being said, obviously, if we lost a sponsor, we would just go back out and secure another sponsor for that slot. There's a limited number of them, and so the person that's responsible for helping with that, it's on the athletic department, but it's also on the Daktronics marketing team. They work to secure that. So
okay, so that's a partnership with them that we would maintain moving forward.
Right. Yes.
Okay.
Anybody else?
Do they get a portion of what's raised, or is that their part of it is included in the purchase price?
It's a free service that they offer to try and help people be able to secure these types of boards.
So I'm going to use the chair's prerogative, and I'm going to ask Brendan, what's your reaction to a board like this? Something that we've never had.
A board like this, what exactly do you mean? I'm sorry.
Meaning a video board on the football field. Are you in the band?
Yes, I am.
Okay, so imagine the band up on the video board. Yeah. Okay.
I think kids are gonna love it. I think it's gonna be awesome. I think it's something that'll bring pride back to kind of the football field. Like, I feel like the biggest thing that having this new field is gonna do is just gonna give a lot of the students more pride regarding performing on the field, or whether it's in sports or in band. I just think it'll help the students feel more excited about what they're doing.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it. All right, so with that, we have a resolution on our agenda. If I can get back to it. All right, I need a motion.
So moved.
Brian
Support.
and Mike. Any comments or questions? All right, be it resolved that the Swartz Creek Community Schools Board of Education hereby approves the purchase of the sound and video scoreboard for the Swartz Creek Community Schools multi-sport athletic complex in the amount of $193,164 from Daktronics. The implementation of the fundraising and marketing plan for Daktronics in the amount of $217,500 over 5 years to support the athletic department general fund will also be implemented as a result of the video board. Joanne, could you please do roll call?
Certainly. Chuck?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Alicia?
Yes.
Jessica? Jessica, I didn't hear you.
Yes.
Thank you. Tony?
Yes.
Gary?
Yes.
And Mike?
Yes.
7 yeses.
Thank you. And Ben, thanks to Tony for his work, his background work on this. This is exciting.
Very exciting. It's going to be nice with this new football field.
All right. Earlier in the meeting, we had a conversation about the water bottle filling stations. And I think, Chuck, you wanted to make a motion at this point.
Yes, I don't know if we need any more discussion, but yeah, I would like to put on the agenda that we give Ben and RC the authority with a dollar amount according to whatever the board wishes are to go ahead and start with a bottle water filling station and start working on that immediately so we can have it up and running if school does open up by September 1st.
Do you have an up to amount that you wanted to suggest, Chuck?
I think 62,000. Would that be okay with you, Ben, or 65,000? I want to add a caveat that's used with grant money, if possible.
Yeah, that would be, that should be more than sufficient. And obviously we'll try and come under that. I mean, if we can, we're going to try and save as much as we can in doing it. But that would be a perfectly acceptable up to amount.
Joanne, do you have enough for a motion?
So moved.
Support.
Go.
So is that, Mike is making the motion based on what you just proposed, Chuck?
I think that's what it was. I'm confused, but yeah,
Okay.
that's fine. Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
and Joanne, do you have enough that you were able to document what Chuck said?
Okay, I have for Mr. Micah and RC to purchase bottled water filling stations for our district up for amount of 62,000, or it was either 62 or 65. $65,000.
With money used from a grant if possible. Is that correct, Chuck?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So we're clear on the motion. So we have Mike and Brian. Any other comments or questions?
I just might want to add in there to clarify, it's for all the current water fountains that we have in place, Joanne. I think that needs to be put in there, but I'm not positive it does or not.
For the current,
It's for the replacement of the current water fountains in our buildings.
Yes.
Yes.
okay,
Sorry for the confusion.
that's okay.
Okay. All right. Any comments or questions? Joanne, can you do a roll call, please?
Certainly.
Thank you.
Jessica?
Yes.
Brian?
Yes.
Chuck?
Yes.
Mike?
Yes.
Carrie?
Yes.
Alicia?
Yes.
And Tony?
Yes.
7 yeses.
All right. Thank you. And thanks for suggesting that, Chuck, and making the motion, Mike and Brian. All right. Now we are moving forward. We are to the part of our meeting where we can hear public comments. And do we have any, Travis?
Nope, no public comment.
Okay. All right. Any comments or questions from the board?
Yes.
Go ahead, Brian.
If anybody has the opportunity, go check out the field. I mean, check out all the schools and all the updates. But I'm telling you, the field looks absolutely amazing with all the stitching they've been doing with the dragon and the Swartz Creek. All the monogramming they've been putting in the field is just absolutely incredible. You've got to check it out. And I think they started it on Tuesday. So maybe they started on Monday, I don't know, but it's beautiful, absolutely beautiful.
Ben, how close can we get to the field, or is it cordoned off?
So legally and safely, I would recommend if you pull in Dragon Drive up by the turnaround by the high school main entrance, you can get a really nice view from there of the field, and that's a perfectly good vantage point.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thanks. Anybody else? Alicia?
I actually just checked my calendar. In looking at the Safe Start plan, Ben, the requirement is that we actually approve a plan before August 15th that we need board approval on. Are we going to have time to do that with our board meeting not scheduled till the 19th?
Yeah, so it's a great point, something that I'll be communicating out with you guys soon. We are probably going to have a special meeting. We actually are required to have 3 plans. So right now, my understanding is that we're going to have 3 different resolutions. The plans that cover phases 1 through 3, a phase 4 plan and a phase 5 plan. So we're in the process of finalizing and finishing the development of those. And so we'll probably need to have a special board meeting established sometime in that first couple weeks of August to be able to comply with that. We're waiting on some guidance from the state in terms of what that actually means. And so well, as soon as I get that, I'll be communicating to the board.
Okay, and then one other question on that. These are notes I made before, sorry. Have we made a request on the federally required assessments?
We have actually, the state has done that to the federal government, and they have actually made that request. I have not heard yet if that request has been accepted.
Okay, so we don't have to make a local request at all?
Not at this time. We're able to do some of those things as a county, and so we're actually meeting about those things right now.
Thank you.
Anyone else?
I have a couple
Jessica.
things, if I may. Ben acknowledged him earlier, and I'm going to say, great job, Travis. Thank you so much, really, for all you do in the district. And I know Carrie said it earlier to you, Ben. Thanks a lot for. I know a lot of the work that you and the rest of the staff is doing is really hard. So thanks for doing a really good job. And Brian, you asked about Brendan, and I've said this to him before because I've known Brendan since he was in elementary school. He and my oldest daughter went to school together. And it is so cool to see all the different things that he does and does it well. I think he's a really great example of being diligent and excellence. And I think he represents Swartz Creek really well. I remember Jacob Winter, Jim, my husband, said at one time, is there anything he doesn't do? And I feel the same way about Brendan. Every time you turn around, there's choir, there's band, there's theater, just all of these things. And so welcome to being the representative, and thanks a lot for being here and representing our students.
Yes,
Thank
Brendan.
you so much.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay. We do have the need to go into closed session for purposes of negotiations per Open Meetings Act 15.268, Section 8C. And I do need a motion.
So moved.
Support.
Alicia and Brian. Any comments or questions? Joanne, can we do a roll call, please?
Certainly. Mike,
Yes.
Carrie,
Yes.
Tony,
Yes.
Alicia,
Sorry.
Alicia,
Yes.
Jessica,
Yes.
Chuck,
Yes.
and Brian.
Yes.
7 yeses.
All right, thanks, Joanne. We can take a small break in between.
And you will see an invitation coming in your emails for the closed session meeting. And then this session, as before, will stay open. And then when we come back into open session, we'll conclude from this meeting.
So can we take 5 minutes so everybody can do whatever they need to do in between?
Yeah,
And then
we can
everybody
go
for
at
that Zoom link.
8:56, and you'll have the invitation in your emails.
Thank you.
Jessica,
Yes,
would you
Joanne,
take notes, please?
I definitely will.
All righty. And Brendan, could you send me your email address? Thank you.
All right, thanks, everybody. See you in a few.
What is your email address so I can send it to you? I'm sorry.
It's just jfranklin@swartzcreek.org.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right,
I have to bow out of this. I got a early start tomorrow.
that's okay, Tony.
Okay, bye-bye.
Have a good night, Tony.
Thanks.
Thanks, Tony.
Thank you.
And I would say we probably don't have to have Brendan wait for us to come back if he wants to be excused.
In your email, you